All right. So this is something that's super cool. I got to tell you, because not a lot of times do you have the opportunity to actually put such cool stories on recording. Something that will last forever, not just for the 10 minutes that you're flapping your gums. You know what I'm saying? And so that's why I'm really, really excited about today. It's one of those things it's been a long time coming. We've talked about it for years and years, and here's an opportunity that I'm very grateful for. I'm grateful for Marcus for, putting this all together and setting it up so we can get it done and taken care of. But my name is Matt Arnold, and today we are going to have the opportunity to listen to my father, Phillip Rey Arnold, who is the ripe young age of 76, getting ready to turn 77.
Yeah, in April.
Nice. April 2nd.
You got it.
The day after April Fool's Day. It's kind of one of those things you always got to remember,
Mom told me I was due on April the 1st, but I fooled him.
There you go. So just to kind of start things out a little bit, you were born on April 2nd, 1944. And basically, I guess, what was it like growing up, back in the 1950s? I mean, where did you grow up?
Well, let's see. I grew up on a farm out in Granger, is what it was called then. It's since changed to West Valley City. But I was raised on a 20-acre farm. We had a huge barn. We had, it was a small house, 2-bedroom. There were 9 people that lived in this 2-bedroom house. I have 2 sisters and 4 brothers.
And where do you sit in there?
I'm the 5th of 7 children.
Okay. So who's your oldest brother?
My oldest brother was John, and then the second brother was Paul, and then Bob. Then there was a sister, Beth, and then I was born, and then another sister and a little brother.
There you go.
So there were 7 of us that shared this small house.
2-bedroom. So did that include like the master bedroom, or was it 2-bedroom like your parents and then you were all in one room?
No, the parents had one room, and all the boys slept in the other one, and the sisters, they had a little summer kitchen that they slept in during the summer, but in the wintertime they slept on a fold-down couch in the front room.
Okay. I remember that. Well, not the fold-down couch, but I remember that little, like the living room of Grandma's old house.
Right.
And was it brick when it was first, or?
The house was originally built in the 1800s, and it was built in 2 parts. It was built by Rasmussen was his name, and he had a wife, and then he took a second wife, and so he built a wood addition to the side. And in order, so there were 2 front doors and 2 living rooms, a kitchen combined, and then 2 bedrooms, one for each wife. And when Mom and Dad bought the place, you had to go out one door and go outside to get in the other half of the house. And when they bought the place,
hold on, was that to keep the 2 wives apart?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so they couldn't walk back and forth. And,
I need to do that in my house. I'm just saying,
Well, you got 2 wives.
No,
yeah,
but
anyway.
like separated, so I don't have to see my kids.
Oh, there you go. But anyway, there wasn't any indoor plumbing, and just when they bought it, an outhouse, and there was a well out by the barn. and they had to carry the water. It was about 100 yards from the house, and Mom said that what they'd done is tied a rope on the pulley and put a bucket on each end of the rope so that the rope wouldn't pull through. And so they'd lower one bucket down, and when you pulled it up, the other bucket would go down. But she claims that in the winter, well, she told us in the wintertime when that rope got wet, it was pretty tough to pull that bucket of water up. And then she had to carry it in the house. She was pregnant at the time with my second oldest brother, and the doctor told her that she couldn't carry those 5-gallon buckets of water anymore. And so the story is that Dad bought her 2.5-gallon buckets so that she wouldn't have to carry them. So,
my man.
So anyway,
That's awesome.
in the house there was, when I was growing up, was a wood burning stove. It was that Mom cooked on, and it had she cooked all of her meals in it, and it was going most of the time because she cooked all of the meals on it. And not only that, but she'd because of the 7 of us kids and Dad, she had to cook. She had to make 8 lunches every day. And so she was baking 24 loaves of bread a week. And that was what we had for snacks. If we wanted anything to eat, we always got a slice of bread and butter and honey is what we ate. But she cooked all of her meals on that, and not only that, but cookies and pies and everything on this wood-burning stove.
Now, wood-burning stove, was it like a potbelly stove?
No. We had a potbelly stove in the front room that was like a heated lighter. This was the name of it, but it was a potbelly stove. And that one not only burned wood, but you could put coal in that one. But the one in the kitchen was just a wood-burning stove only. And that's how it had a back to it that come over the top. And it was like a warming oven on the top that you could pull down, and they could put food up there to keep it warm. We put the honey. They would put that up there to warm it, because Dad used to buy honey in 5-gallon cans, and he'd buy 3 or 4 of those until we got our own hives, and it was thick. And so it had to be warmed up in order for you could spread it on the bread.
So let's back up here for a second. So you had hives?
Yeah, we did. Later on, when I was a kid, we had hives, and that's another good story.
All right. I'm looking forward to that one. Okay.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to tell that one.
What? No, this is open mic. You tell all the stories. Like, we can edit them out later.
There you
Don't
go.
edit it out.
Edit that one. Edit that one out. Anyway. Anyway, the stove was going all of the time, and that was the only heat in the house. And so when the stove would go out in the wintertime with no heat, we'd wake up in the morning, and sometimes there would be frost on the brass bed, the head beds, and so we slept under 2 or 3 blankets when it was in the wintertime to keep warm.
Did you guys share a bed, or did you all have individual?
No. It was a real small bedroom, and it was almost wall-to-wall beds, and so there was at least 2 in each bed the whole time we was growing up.
Did you have some good wrestling matches at night? I mean,
no, but we used to fight on who got to sleep by the wall. It was a big deal. But
why was the wall such an important?
You know what? That's a
Real
good
estate.
question, but I remember the fights. I don't know.
Oh, perfect real estate, you're right next to the wall. Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know either. You'd think that'd be the cold spot, but that was a preferred area. But anyway, we survived.
Dude, that's crazy. So 5 brothers in a small room, all in like 2 beds, 3 beds.
Yeah, it was 2 beds in there. I think my youngest brothers spent first couple of years in mom and dad's bedroom in the crib. I remember when I was a little teeny kid that I slept in a crib with mom and dad.
Okay.
So anyway,
that's awesome. What I'm just trying to think about, like, growing up like that, on a farm. What did you guys farm? What was the big thing that you guys did?
Actually, my father worked out at Kennecott, and we leased the ground out to the neighbors who ran several thousand acres of ground, and they had dry farms and irrigated farms, and we worked for the neighbors most of the time when I was growing up. Dad used to always plant at least 6 acres of beets every year because it kept us busy. You had to thin them back then and then hoe them, and then we'd weed them, and we got paid to do that. And then when we'd collect at the end of the summer, and that's what we went to town and bought our school clothes with. We always bought our own clothes with the money that we...
So beets, let's back up. Let's talk about the beets. So you grew beets and then you threw them away. It was just to keep you guys busy, right? Because nobody eats beets.
Well, these were sugar beets, and it used to be there were 3 or 4 sugar factories around here. It was UNI Sugar at the time, and they'd process them, but the church got out of it. It was the church owned the Utah. It was into the sugar beet factories, and
so so it's not what was it? CNH, pure cane sugar. That's one. It was UNH.
It's UNI.
UNI.
It was Utah, Idaho.
Okay.
That's what it was. It was run by the church, and then I think what happened was the federal government quit subsidizing the beets, and so they closed them all down. There's still a couple of beet factories out one in Sandy, and there was, I'm trying to think where the other one was, but there's a couple of them that you run by. There's one down in Orem that I drive by and look for every time I go down that area.
Now, digging up beets, that's not an easy thing.
Well, back then they did it by hand. They'd take to begin with, what they did is plowed them, and then you'd have you'd top them by hand and then throw them in a pile, and then a truck would come and they'd throw them by hand into the truck, and later then they got a beet harvester, and that would dig them and top them and put them up in a bin.
Was the beet harvester named Phil?
Yeah, I rode. They had a plank out the back that I would sit on, and with a beet knife that had a hook on it. And once in a while, the harvester would miss one, and it was worth it to have somebody sitting back there and pick those up, and then and lop them the heads off and throw them up into the bin. So they hired me to ride that.
How old were you when you started?
I was about, I don't know, 12 or 13 when I was doing that.
Okay. What else did you guys have on the farm? I mean, did you have cattle? Did you have...
We raised everything that you can fathom on the farm. We had a milk cow that we just did for our own use. We had about 1,000 chickens that we raised all the time. We had six chicken coops that we'd rotate them through.
Wait, 1,000 chickens?
Yeah, we sold the eggs. We gather them and clean them and sell them.
That's a lot of chickens.
You're telling me I hated them.
Like, as far as like taking care of the chickens, did you feed them? Did you have to clean up after them? Did you have to get eggs?
Yeah. We had to gather the eggs we gathered the eggs every day. And then we'd have to sit and clean them. And we had a pot there that if the egg was cracked or something, you go to wash it, it'd just explode you'd drop it in this pan. And then we fed them to the dog, and the dog had the shiniest coat you can imagine because he got all the raw eggs.
That's awesome.
They loved them.
What kind of dogs did you have?
All kinds. We had one dog that was by far the smartest and the best. His name was Prince, and he was a cross between a purebred Cocker Spaniel and a Heinz 57. We had no idea who the father was, but he was a real good dog. Then we had a couple of hunting dogs, a Prince and Brownie that we used to hunt pheasants with. And anyway,
tell me about your dad. Honestly, like, I know some stories about your dad, but I don't know a lot.
Dad was a special guy. He was quite a disciplinarian, and he taught us how to work. I know he assigned you a job, and he expected you to do the job. I remember it was my job to bring the kindling in for the stove in the morning, and he'd get up in the morning and build the fire and let Mom stay in bed till the kitchen warmed up from the fire. And one morning in the wintertime, I hadn't got the kindling, and so I was up at 6 o'clock out in the snow. And I'm about 5 or 6 years old, digging through the snow trying to find some kindling to go in and take it to Dad, and I never missed again. At another time, I was supposed to clean the cat pen, and I went to bed without doing it, and he came in about 10, 11 o'clock at night and woke me up. Said, "You cleaned the cat pen?" And I said, "I'll do that tomorrow." And he says, "You'll do that now." And so I got up and was shoveling manure at midnight. But he was, I loved my dad a lot, and I could tell that he loved me, but there was rules to obey. One of them was be home every night at 4 o'clock, no matter 4:30, and Dad got off at 4, and he wanted all the kids there at 4:30, and we ate at 5, and then he'd assign us jobs if he needed them, Dad and Mom were real religious, and Dad had a lot of callings in the church. And my brother always claimed that if Dad never had a meeting to go to, he called one. And I think the reason is to get out of the house with 7 kids running around. And
it not being a big house, let's be honest. It's not like you can send your kids to the room and not see them.
Yeah, really, because there wasn't room to. All we did in the bedroom was sleep. It was about the size of it. We had a front room that we spent a lot of time in. We played a lot of cards and board games and stuff.
Is that where you got, because I was bragging you up the other night to my kids about shuffling, because we've been playing Uno a lot lately. And anyway, I was showing my kids how to like shuffle and like bridge and different things like that. And I was like, yeah, I learned this from watching my dad. Like he he loved to play cards.
We played quite a few cards. No face cards were supposed to be in the house. I can't tell you how many of my face cards that my mother threw away, but we played a lot of Rook and other games. Rook, and we called a game called Pounce that we did.
What was Pounce like?
Oh, it was just it's about like spoons, if you know that game. But it's just an old game we used to play.
That's cool. That's way cool. What I mean, we kind of talked a little. I got to know about the cellar though. Like, here's the thing. Like, I remember Grandma's house.
Okay.
And the cellar scared the hell out of me. Like, that thing was like the dungeon of all get out.
Well, so what the story about this cellar is the house never had a basement in it, and so in the 50s, my dad decided that he was going to put a furnace in the house, and so we started digging it out underneath, and we just dug a hole on one side of the house, and then started digging it out, and eventually we got it out enough that they got a scraper underneath there and borrowed the neighbor's workhorse and used it to scrape out the bottom of it. And then he slid a deep freeze down there, and then poured the wall around it. And he'd dig out one part underneath the foundation, and then pour the wall for the basement, and then dig another part and pour the foundation. And when he got through that deep freeze was still there when they pushed the house over. There was no way to get it out, and they took the locks off it. Mom used it to store blankets and stuff in at the end. But anyway, it was there was only about half of the house had a basement underneath it. There was one that was just plain dirt, and that's where Dad set up his reloading stuff. And we used to reload shotgun shells and all kinds of things down there. We used to make our own arrows back before they were just wood shafts, and we'd glue the feathers on and had a wire that we could this thing that we could turn it and heat it, and it'd cut the feathers evenly around, and we hunt deer with those, made our own bows and stuff.
How did you do? I mean, I got to know. Like, that's some Robin Hood shit right there, And like, were you a pretty good shot?
I was a pretty good shot. I just never hit nothing. We went deer hunting. We went deer hunting all the time. But what Dad did is up in the top of the barn, we put planks along the rafters and put targets up at the other end, and we'd shoot. They had lights out there, and we'd shoot all winter practicing, and we got pretty good. My older brother, he shot a couple of deer with his bow. I never got one with my bow until a few years ago. I've got a recurve and a compound bow, and with aluminum arrows and sights and range finders and all that stuff. And I still went out and shot, got a deer.
There you go. What now? I'm telling you, you're downplaying this because I know some of these stories. So tell me about going out and shooting those arrows in the top of the barn, because I mean, I've heard you tell what kind of shot you became.
Well, they used to get mad at me because I'd aim for the nocks of the arrows and break their arrows with them. So I got so that I I could hit pretty good. I shot a couple of sparrows with a bow. And I hate to admit it, but a couple of robins that were around.
A robin redbreast? No.
Well, I didn't have a redbreast when I got through, but anyway.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Is I remember growing up, you talking about shooting the nocks off the bows or off the arrows and breaking their arrows and stuff, and that's what I'm talking about. It's just
they told me to cut it out,
so you didn't. I know you.
You got it.
It was an accident. I promise. I didn't mean to shoot that.
Anyway.
So how big was your barn?
It was big. It was I don't know how many square feet, but it was a big old barn. And they had one side was for the cattle and then there was a center section where we stored the hay and stuff. And then on the other side was actually built for horses and a place to park wagons and stuff, because the barn was built in the late 1800s, and it was a lot of fun that we did spend a lot of time playing there.
So your dad didn't build it. It was there when you guys bought the house?
No, the house, the house and the barn, it was there, and there was a granary with a root cellar underneath it. But,
that's awesome. And so you had did you have horses?
We had one. It really wasn't ours. What happened was a neighbor had a horse, and it was a little Mustang. They'd caught it off the west desert and tamed it, and he'd stake it out on the ditch banks and let it feed there, but they didn't move it very often. It was close enough to the ditch that it could get water out of the ditch, but it had run out of food, and it got so that it could back up and pull the stake out of the ground, and then it would come over in our hay fields or in our grain fields. We lived right next door to us. So one day I looked out down there, and there was this horse out in the grain field, and so I went down, and they had about a 30-foot chain hooked to the halter, and I got a hold of the chain and just wrapped it around its nose and hopped on its back bareback and rode it all day. And that night I took it home and tied it out back at the barn. And went down the next day and asked the owner if I could get the saddle and the bridle, and he gave it to me.
Who was the owner?
It was his name was Wayne Eldridge, and so anyway, he gave me the saddle and the bridle, and I took it home, and I never did saddle a horse. I'd put on the bridle, and I rode a bareback. I used to ride that thing almost every day, summer, winter, spring, and fall. Loved that horse, and he said that'd be a good deal that you have it, and then I can get it in shape for deer hunting. So he never did come after it. He'd send somebody up to shoe it every spring, and every fall he'd send somebody up to take the shoes off and trim the hoofs and just left it there until I left to go on my mission. And I'd been there about 3 or 4 weeks, and I found out that he'd come and got the horse and the bridle and the saddle and sold them. I wish I'd have been around. I'd have bought the horse. I got so I loved that horse.
Well, did you name it?
I didn't. It was Spurt was its name. I got a picture of it hanging on the wall down in my basement.
That's a fitting name.
Spurt. Yeah, it was. He was a heck of a horse. But anyway.
Dude, that's awesome. Wow. I haven't, I didn't know you had him that long.
Yeah, he actually came and went. he was been around the house a long time. What happened was he had the horse and his house burned down. And he had this, so he brought it up, and we volunteered to take care of it. And so my older brothers rode it for a couple of 3 years, and then they moved a house in alongside of the burned down house and was going to rebuild it and come and got the horse back. And they had it for a couple of years, and then that's when I went after it when they didn't ride it and they didn't take very good care of it, and so we had the horse more than he did, actually.
How old were you when you started riding it?
Oh, I was about 15.
Okay.
15 until I had it for 3 or 4 years. That was 15, 16 around there before I left on to go south, and when I was 19.
There you go. And well, let's back up a little bit because we were talking about the barn, and then we just kind of jumped right into mission field, you know. But I was going to ask you about your cows. How many cows did you have?
We usually had one, and what Dad would do is we just had enough to milk for the family. So what we would do is he'd breed the cow every year. And if it had a calf, it was if it was a bull, then we milked the cow another year and bred it again. If it was a heifer, then they would wait a year and breed the heifer. And when it came in, then they'd kill the old milk cow, and that's what we ate. And let me tell you, that meat was tougher than nails. And Mom didn't think it was done unless it was black, I swear. And I've cut a piece of meat and chewed on it, and finally I couldn't get it to break down and excuse myself and go spit it out, is because it was pretty tough.
Sounds like my mom. You know, no wonder you were so attached to Cindy. She cooked just like Grandma.
Oh boy, I'm not kidding.
That's funny.
But,
that's cool. What? So there's a couple of things that I wanted to hit on about the barn, because there is the age-old story, and I've heard this story no less than
10 times.
Oh, that's being generous. I would say at least 25. But it has to do with somebody daring you to jump out the top of the barn.
Oh boy. I was a little kid, had rheumatic fever when I was 6, and
so let me ask you about rheumatic fever. Did you go to the doctor?
Oh yeah.
Okay, just checking, because that's another thing I learned.
On that one I did. It was pretty serious. In fact, when I had when they diagnosed me with rheumatic fever, I was 6 years old, and so they moved me from the bedroom into the front room where the potbelly stove was, and that one would burn coal also. So I had to be kept warm, and so I slept on the couch next to this potbelly stove, and every night Dad would put in a chunk of coal, and it would burn all night long, and it'd keep me warm. But when they put me in bed and told me I couldn't get out for anything, and my little brother Mervyn, he was only 2 and I'm 6, and I had a puzzle that I was playing with, and he come and pulled it off of the thing and ran with it, and I come flying out of bed, chasing him across the room, and my mother slapped my face like you can't believe. And I said, Mom, I'm sitting there crying. I says, it's not my fault. He stole my puzzle. She says, I don't care what he does. You don't get out of that bed for nothing. And so from then on, I never. They gave me a can that I'd whiz into. And if I had to go to the toilet, then my mother would carry me on her back into the bathroom, and so that I never left the bed for about 3 months. But we never had a television, but we had the radio, and you'd be surprised at the shows that were on the radios. I listened to I remember some of the programs. There was a sitcom on about like how the world turns, or how my stomach turns, or whatever it is now. But they had One Man's Family, and it went as slow as those sitcoms do today. And they had Sky King and the Lone Ranger and the Cisco Kid and all of those, and I used to spend a lot of time listening to the radio. And I had a home teacher at home that would come into the house, and she would come once a week. Her name was Miss Short, and she would give me homework. I was in the first grade, but she would just tell me, show me things, and Mom would help me, and I could go as fast as I wanted. So, and I quite enjoyed doing it. And when I got to the second grade, they were talking about skipping the second grade because I'd already done all the math and all of the reading. I'd already read their last reader for the second grade when I got there, but they decided that I wasn't physically nor emotionally able to go with kids a year older than me. So they held me. I went through the second grade, and I never had to do anything. The teacher was always asking me, because, Phil, you've already done this, tell the class. The problem is when I got in the third grade, I didn't do anything either. And instead of going ahead, I ended up falling behind a little bit.
That happens.
Yeah, but anyway.
What, growing up, I mean, that's something I've never asked, is as far as developmentally, like maturity level, growth, different things like that. When did you hit your growth spurt? Because you were 6'2"?
Yeah, I was 6'2", but not until I was in about the eighth grade, I started to grow. I had some kid that used to pick on me when I was in the 7th grade, and I was just a little squirt. And over the summer, I grew, and I just wanted him to touch me once when I went back, because I'd grown quite a bit.
Oh yeah. So how old were you when you got to 6'2"?
Oh, I don't know. I was in high school, I imagine,
Okay.
when I finally got my full height.
There you go. And where did you go to junior high?
Valley Junior High.
That's right. Same school as me. What? So I always thought that was cool.
Yeah.
So after you got rheumatic fever, what took you outside to the barn? I got to hear this story again.
Okay. Well, I was outside playing, and my rules were I could get out of bed, but I wasn't supposed to run or hike or do anything very strenuous. And the barn was about empty of hay, and there was a kid out there. They were trying to get him to jump off. We had some shingles out in the barn, and he wanted him to jump off, and he wouldn't do it. And I said, geez, I'll jump off the rafters. And so I'm 6 years old, and so I climb up in the rafters, and I'm looking down, and boy, that's a long ways to the ground. And I'm wondering if I want to do this or not. And then the crew came to haul the hay, and there was 3 or 4 guys there, and they said, Phil's going to jump off the rafters, so they all come to watch. And so then I was stuck, and so I just kind of closed my eyes and bailed off. And next thing I know, they're carrying me in the house. Apparently my knees had come up and hit me in the chin and knocked me out colder than a wedge. And they were carrying me in the house, and when I come to, and I start scrambling like heck, I says, "You got to let me go. I can't go in the house. I'll get a beating for being up in the rafters." And so I jumped down and run back. So nothing serious happened.
I've always imagined that because there's been so many times that I've like racked myself in the chin, and I can only imagine the impact that had to take place in order for your knees to knock you out.
Yeah, it was went straight. Yep.
That's awesome. What as far as like growing up, things like that, you had pets, you had animals. I know you had some close calls as far as like different things that took place. Like I've heard the story about Bob and falling in front of the tractor.
Yeah, Bob did, but I had a couple. I had several actually. I've got about a 4-inch scar on my left hand, and I never knew where it came from. I always looked at my hand and wondered how come I never had one on my right hand. I thought it was some sort of a pad or something, and I went and asked my mom what had happened. And come to find out, when I was about 2 years old, I climbed up on the drain board, or the whatever you want to call it, by the cupboards. They had some baby food up there that was called pablum that was quite sweet, and I was and I had a little sister, yeah, that they were feeding it to, and I wanted some, and I knocked a glass water pitcher onto the floor and then fell on it and cut my hand, and they hauled me over to the doctor, and they did several stitches in it. And I didn't remember that. But the one that is when I hung myself, it was when I was about 4 years old. They were spraying the orchard, and we had a calf out in the orchard that was eating the orchard grass, and they brought the calf in and tied a rope around. They had a clothesline that ran between two trees that was about 50 feet long, and Dad tied the calf to the clothesline to get it out of the orchard, and he didn't want it to get into the flower bed, so he shortened the rope and just made a loop out of it. Well, we never had garbage back in those days. What we had was a pit out behind the old granary where they threw the garbage, and there was a 4-legged stool out there that only had 3 legs. One of the legs that broke off was one of those stools that are around 4 inches, not about 9 or 10 inches in diameter, octagonal type of a thing that they used to put the telephone on. And one of the legs had broke off, and I went and got that leg and propped it back underneath it. And then I had my cap guns on and was going to play a hangman. And so I climbed up on this 4-legged stool and leaned forward to put my head through the noose, and that 4th leg that I just propped up popped out, and I dropped down. And my sister was there. My older sister was 2 years older than me, and she carried my sister that was 2 years younger than me. So she was 5, and my little sister was 3, and she carried her in the house and got Mom and said, "Phil's out there dying." So Mom come running out of the house, and in her words, she said that the rope was twisted around my neck, and when she untwisted it, I dropped out, and I was black and blue. My lips were blue, and she couldn't tell if I was breathing or not. And so she started screaming for my dad, who was out around the barn, and he'd had some training out at Kennecott about on safety stuff, and figured that she knew how to do artificial respiration, and she didn't, and he didn't hear her and didn't come, and so she tried to do what she could. And when I woke up, I couldn't open my eyes, but I could feel my mother on me, you know. And she was hurting me. Geez, the pressure she was putting on me. But anyway, Dad finally showed up, and he carried me in the house and laid me on the couch, and I passed out. And this was Mom said that in her diary, she wrote that she was just fixing lunch at the time, so it was in the morning when it happened. And when I woke up, they were out at the kitchen table eating supper, and I come bailing off the couch and said, "How come nobody woke me up for supper?" And Dad says, "Well, he must be okay." So, but anyway, I survived.
There you go. That's a hell of a story.
I wondered if that didn't affect my ears also, though I'm a little hard of hearing, you know,
Did you, with that, you know, that's something, as far as your hearing goes, I've always known that you're hard of hearing in one ear. Which ear is it?
It's the left ear is the worst. My right ear is pretty good.
You know what? It's funny. I'm opposite with my eyes. I had my left eye fixed. So, anyway, but with your hard hearing in, what'd you say is your left ear?
Yeah.
Okay. So, what did that prevent you from doing in the military? I want to hear this story. This is an epic story. This is like, and then I think, let's see, we've been going now for 47 minutes. I would say, like, that's a great story to, like, wrap up with tonight.
Okay, I've always wanted to be an airline pilot ever since I was a kid. When I was a kid, airplanes were quite rare. And we would run outside. You could hear them coming long before they ever got there. And you'd hear one, and you'd run outside, you know, and watch them fly over. And I wanted to do that. And so...
Let me ask really quick. With airplanes back in the 50s when you were a kid, were they commercial? I mean, did people travel airplanes?
Yeah, oh, yeah. They had, they started that. But they were quite rare. There weren't nearly the commercial airlines like there are now. And helicopters, I remember the first helicopter I ever saw. You know, that was I looked it up in the encyclopedia, and it said an unstable machine is the way they described this in the encyclopedia when I was a kid. But anyway, when I was going to college, it was the height of the Vietnam War, and they were begging for pilots. I've seen pictures of airplane pilots' helmets over in Vietnam that they had stacked up like they did the shoes during the Holocaust for the Jews, and so they were losing a lot of pilots over there. And so what I decided to do was I was going to join the Air Force, and so I could get the hours, and then I wanted to be a commercial airline pilot. So if you had a college degree and could pass their test, they guaranteed you flight school. So I went to college and graduated in the easiest thing that I could find, which was I graduated in accounting, and took their test and passed the test, and then went up to Hill Air Force Base to take a physical. And one of the tests they gave me was the hearing test. And I was sitting in the soundproof booth, and this sergeant come around and ripped the door open. And he says, "For crying out loud," but that isn't the exact words he used. But he said, "When I turn it on, press the button." And I says, "For crying out loud, turn it on, and I will." And he said, "Oh." So then he finished the test, and when it got through, he said, "You're legally deaf in one ear and need a hearing aid in the other on high frequencies." And I never even knew it. He said, "You're so bad that there's no way that you can even take the test again." So then I decided, you know what, I'm going to try to fly Navy. So I signed up for a bunch of stuff and took their test, and they flew me down to Alameda, California for the physical. Now I knew I had a problem. So when I was listening, I couldn't hear the sound, but I could hear the click when he turned it on. So he'd go click, and I'd press the button, click, and then I'd let off. Click, 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 click. And I was doing fairly well, and a jet flew over, and I lost my place. And I didn't know when I heard click if he was turning it off or if he was turning it on. So I had to stop until it got low enough. You start on the high frequencies until it got low enough I could hear it again. When he got through, he said, "You know what? You got a spot there you don't hear very well." So he said, "You're right on the border. We're going to have to send this to the Department of the Navy before we can tell you whether you can fly or not." So I went home, and your mom was pregnant with the oldest, Phil, and she kind of wanted me around when the baby was born, and so I called the draft board and asked them if they'd put off my draft till I heard from the Navy, and they said no, because even though you're accepted, you're under no obligation to accept. So if you want to wait for the Navy, you got to go join the Navy. Well, I didn't want to go in for 3 years if I wasn't going to fly. And so what I did is went down, and I waited for a couple of weeks until I was getting a little nervous. I went down, and they had a 90-day delayed enlistment so that you could join the Army and then wait 90 days before you had to go in. And so I went down on a Friday afternoon, got off of work, and went down on a Friday afternoon and got sworn into the Army. Saturday morning at 7 a.m., they called and said, "Congratulations, you've been accepted to fly." And I said, "I joined the Army yesterday." And they said, "There's not a thing we can do. Goodbye." Click. So I missed it by 1 day. But as it turned out, I wasn't too upset about it, because when I went to Alameda, they took me down on an aircraft carrier, and they said, when you graduate, you fly off these aircraft carriers, and you spend 6 months over to Nam, and then you're 6 months home, and 6 months, and then home, and you have to do that for 3 years. So you're over there a year and a half. It says, "What's the percentage of pilots you lose flying off of these things?" And he said, "Well, we lose about a third of them each trip." So I said, "So what you're telling me is if you go over 3 times, your odds of coming home are pretty slim." And they said, "Well, it's like having a child. You got a 50-50 chance having a baby boy, but every time you start, you got the same odds." So that didn't look too good to me. So anyway, as it turns out, I'm not a pilot. I came home and got a job doing the only thing I'd been trained to do, and that was be an accountant, and that's where I ended up.
There you go. That's what I remember is the accounting. But where did you, real quick, where did you work? Where were you working when you joined the Army?
I worked for your mom's father, actually. And I started there right after I worked out to Kennecott, and they went on strike, and I needed a job, and so Cindy said, "Why don't you go down and talk to Dad?" So I went down and asked him if he had something I could do, and he told me, "No, we don't hire part-time help. You're going back to college." And he said, "Just look around, but I don't, no." So
that sounds like Eldon. Like, I'm just telling you right now, that sounds like Eldon.
So
Get the hell out.
2 or 3 days went by, and he called me on the phone. He said, "You found a job yet?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, I've got this overhead door down here I want painted. So if you wanna come and paint that," he said, "you can do that while you're looking." And I said, "Okay." So I went down the next day, and they put me on a heister unloading a car of 100-pound blocks of asphalt. And I never got off the heister. I stayed there for it was about 46 years, I guess. Anyway, I ended up retiring from there.
Absolute. No, that was that's what I remember. But you never ran a heister when I was a kid, so.
No, I did that for a couple of years while I was still in college, and then I left and went in the Army for a couple of years and came back on leave and worked for a couple of weeks, and then I went back in the Army and came back, and then after I'd been back a while, I came home on emergency leave because my dad was dying of cancer, and I needed a job where I could deal with the Army because I was stationed out at Dugway Proving Grounds. And so I stayed there working out in the yard until Dad had passed away in the funeral, and then I decided I was going to look for something a little more than being a yard guy. And I got a job with a Heber J. Grant insurance company as an accountant. And when Eldon found out, he says, "I don't want you to leave. I've got a place for you here." So I said, "Okay." So I stayed.
That's awesome. Well, and that's it. That's a story that we're gonna circle back to, because like there are a lot of stories that you can come up with after 46 years of sitting behind the same desk with the same pictures on the same wall. And
I used to add a duck or a pheasant or something on that wall all the time, depending on what I was hunting or fishing.
Oh, I remember. That's kind of like my office. Somebody told me I got to recycle. They're like, "Dude, your office is getting too packed." I got a new. It's a statue that my friend gave me. It's Grogu from The Mandalorian, and it's pretty freaking epic. So anyway, but I again, thank you very much. Thank you, Marcus. I think this was like I said, it's a great opportunity for you to talk and to tell your story for so many people to be able to enjoy and listen, and the details, because a lot of times when you look at family history and you look at, going back and reading journals, and I know you don't journal and I don't journal, and it's not something that it's like, it's one of those things as kids, we learn a lot from our parents. I know how to work. I know how to work really hard, but I don't know how to journal because you don't. So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like having the opportunity to have your story told by you is exponential, because a lot of times, like when you read a book, it's a great story, but you don't get that human emotion. You don't get that love. And the other thing that I really, really appreciate about it is I have my own stories. And when I go to tell a story about you, it's like you butcher it. It's not the same. And so that's where it's like I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And, you know, we'll circle back and we'll do some more. And, like, you know, any other stories you want to share or pop through, I'm happy to sit and listen to them. Or if you decide to come down on your own, you know, sit here with Marcus.
Either way, I'd love to have you here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a list of stories, and I only hit one.
There you go.
We're good.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you again, and we'll be back soon enough.
All right, sounds good.